In a small, quiet neighborhood nestled between towering oak trees and rows of cozy houses, 10-year-old Malik lived with his grandmother. The two of them shared a tiny but warm home filled with laughter, stories, and the smell of freshly baked cookies that always seemed to waft through the air. For Malik, life was simple yet full of wonder. He loved exploring the world around him. Nothing brought him more joy than riding his shiny red bicycle. The bicycle wasn't just any ordinary bike, it was special. It had been a gift from Grandma Ruth on his 10th birthday, wrapped in bright blue paper with a big yellow bow on top. "This is your ticket to adventure," she had said with a twinkle in her eye as she handed it over. From that day forward, Malik spent every afternoon after school pedaling through the streets, feeling like he could go anywhere and do anything. To him, the bicycle wasn't just a mode of transportation. It was freedom, confidence, and happiness, all rolled into one. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, Malik grabbed his helmet and headed outside. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds that looked like cotton candy. Birds chirped cheerfully from the branches above, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Everything felt perfect. As Malik hopped onto his bike, he felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. Where would he ride today? Maybe he'd loop around the park, race down the hill by the library, or even visit Mr. Jenkins' lemonade stand at the corner. With a push of his feet, Malik set off. Down the street, the wheels spinning smoothly beneath him. The wind rushed past his face, cooling the warmth of the sun on his cheeks. He grinned widely, feeling invincible. Life felt so big and exciting when he was on his bike. Passing by neighbors' houses, he waved hello to Mrs. Patel, watering her flowers, and gave a thumbs up to little Sophie, drawing chalk pictures on her driveway. Everyone knew Malik in the neighborhood. He was the boy with the big smile and the red bike, who brought a spark of energy wherever he went. As he turned onto Elm Street, however, something caught his attention near the entrance to the park. A group of older teenagers stood gathered under a tree. They were laughing loudly, their voices echoing across the otherwise peaceful street. Malik slowed down instinctively, his fingers tightening slightly on the handlebars. Something about the way they glanced at him made his stomach feel funny, like butterflies fluttering nervously inside. He didn't know these kids. They weren't from his school or his block, but their stares followed him as he rode past. One of them nudged another and smirked, pointing toward Malik's bike. Though he couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, Malik felt a shiver run down his spine. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, reminding himself that this was his neighborhood, and he had every right to be here. Still, he picked up speed, eager to get away from the group and back to the safety of his own street. But no matter how fast he pedaled, the image of those teenagers lingered in his mind. Why had they looked at him like that? What had they been whispering about? Questions swirled in Malik's head, dampening the carefree joy he'd felt earlier. Despite the beautiful weather and the smooth hum of his bike's tires against the pavement, the lightness in his chest began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Little did Malik know, a seemingly ordinary day was about to take a turn, one that would test his courage, challenge his spirit, and teach him lessons far beyond anything he'd ever imagined while riding his beloved red bicycle. Malik pedaled faster, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest, but as he glanced over his shoulder, he saw that one of the teenagers had stepped away from the group and was now walking toward the middle of the road. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a smirk on his face that made Malik's heart race even faster. His friends stood behind him, laughing and shouting things Malik couldn't quite make out but could feel in the pit of his stomach. "Hey, kid," the older boy called out, his voice sharp and mocking. "Where do you think you're going so fast?" Malik froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should he stop? Keep riding? Call for help? Before he could decide, the teenager moved closer, blocking his path completely. The red bike wobbled slightly as Malik squeezed the brakes, bringing it to an abrupt halt. His hands trembled on the handlebars as he looked up at the group surrounding him. There were 5 of them altogether, their faces twisted into expressions that ranged from amusement to hostility. They loomed over him like shadows, making him feel smaller than he ever had before. One of the boys leaned down, inspecting Malik's bike with exaggerated curiosity. "Wow, check this out," he sneered, running a finger along the shiny frame. "This thing looks brand new. Where'd you get it, huh? Steal it?" "No," Malik replied quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's mine. My grandma gave it to me." The group erupted into laughter, their voices harsh and cutting. "Grandma?" another boy mocked, shaking his head. "What kind of name is that for a bike? You should have called it Loser instead." Tears pricked at the corners of Malik's eyes, but he blinked them back fiercely. Didn't want to cry, not here. Not in front of these boys who already seemed determined to make fun of him. Instead, he gripped the handlebars tighter, hoping they would leave him alone if he stayed quiet. So maybe if he ignored them, they'd grow bored and walk away. But the leader of the group wasn't done yet. He crouched down until he was eye level with Malik, his smirk widening. "You know what I think?" said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I think someone like you doesn't deserve a nice bike like this. What do you even need it for?"
Are you running errands for your grandma?
The others laughed again, louder this time, their words stinging worse than any slap. Malik felt his cheeks burn with shame and anger. Someone like him? What did that even mean? Was it because of the color of his skin? Because of the clothes he wore? Or just because he was younger and smaller than they were? Before Malik could respond, or even think of something to say, a loud bark shattered the tension. From across the street, an elderly man appeared, tugging gently on the leash of a small brown dog. "What's going on here?" the man demanded, his voice firm and authoritative. He was thin and gray-haired, with glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his tone. For a split second, everyone froze. Then the leader straightened up, rolling his eyes. "Nothing," he muttered, stepping back onto the sidewalk. "We were just messing around, no big deal." The elderly man crossed his arms over his chest, clearly unconvinced. "Messing around?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Looks more like bullying to me. Why don't you all take your messing around somewhere else before I call the police?" The mention of the police. The group exchanged nervous glances. Grumbling under their breath, they began to shuffle away, casting one last glare at Malik before disappearing around the corner. The elderly man watched them go, then turned his attention to Malik, his expression softening. "You okay, son?" he asked kindly, kneeling beside him. His dog wagged its tail enthusiastically, sniffing at Malik's sneakers. Malik nodded slowly, though his hands were still trembling. Yeah, he stammered, his voice shaky. "Thank you." The man smiled warmly. "No problem. Just remember, people like that aren't worth your tears."
I don't let them ruin your day, all right?
Malik managed a weak smile in return, though inside, he didn't feel much better. The encounter had left him shaken, and the joyful freedom he'd felt earlier while riding his bike now felt distant, almost unreachable. But he knew he couldn't stay there forever. Taking a deep breath, he pushed off the ground and began pedaling home, his legs moving automatically despite the weight of everything that had just happened. As he rode, Malik replayed the scene in his mind over and over again. Cruel words, the laughter, the way they'd looked at him like he didn't belong. It all felt so unfair. And yet part of him wondered if maybe they were right. Did he really deserve a bike like this? Was he somehow less worthy because of who he was? By the time he reached his house, Malik's chest felt heavy with emotions he couldn't quite name. He parked his bike by the front steps and sat down on the porch staring blankly at the ground. Grandma Ruth would be home soon, and he dreaded having to tell her what had happened. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? For now, all Malik wanted to do was sit quietly and try to forget the events of the day. But deep down, he knew that forgetting wouldn't be easy. Not when the memory of those boys' taunts lingered in his mind like a storm cloud refusing to pass. Malik sat on the porch steps, his small frame hunched forward as he stared at the ground. His red bike leaned against the railing nearby, its once shiny surface now dulled by the weight of what had happened. He could still hear their voices in his head, the mocking laughter, the cruel words that seemed to echo endlessly. It was as If they were stuck on repeat, playing over and over again, no matter how hard he tried to push them away, his hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the handlebars of his bike. The smooth metal felt cold under his fingertips, a stark contrast to the warmth it usually brought him. This bike had always been more than just a toy. It was a gift from Grandma Ruth, a symbol of love and encouragement. But now it felt tainted, like a reminder of something ugly he couldn't escape. Why did they have to say those things? Malik whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them back stubbornly. Crying wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't erase what had happened or make him feel better about himself. Still, the lump in his throat refused to go away, and the heaviness in his chest only grew worse with each passing moment. Inside the house, the clock ticked loudly, marking the minutes until Grandma Ruth returned home. She worked part-time at the local bakery, and Malik knew she'd be back soon, humming one of her favorite songs and carrying a bag of fresh bread. Normally, hearing her voice and smelling the scent of baked goods made him smile. Today, though, he dreaded seeing her. How could he tell her what had happened? What would she think of him? The sound of the front door opening snapped Malik out of his thoughts. He looked up to see Grandma Ruth stepping inside, her face lighting up when she spotted him. "There's my champion," setting the bread down on the counter. "How was your ride today?" For a moment, Malik considered telling her everything, opened his mouth, ready to spill the story of the teenagers, the taunts, and the way they'd made him feel so small. But then he hesitated. What if she got upset? What if she thought less of him for not standing up to them? Instead, he forced a weak smile and shrugged. "It was okay," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Grandma Ruth tilted her head, studying him carefully. She had always been good at reading people, especially Malik. Something about the way he slouched on the steps and avoided looking at her told her that something wasn't right. "Okay?" she repeated gently, sitting down beside him. "That doesn't sound like the Malik I know. Usually you come home bursting with stories about all the places you've ridden your bike." Malik shrugged again, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "I guess I didn't go very far today," he admitted quietly. Grandma Ruth frowned, concern etched across her face. "Is something bothering you, sweetheart?" she asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm and comforting, but it only made Malik feel worse. He wanted to tell Hurt to let the words pour out like a dam breaking, but instead he shook his head. "No," he lied, forcing another smile. "I'm fine. Just tired, that's all." Grandma Ruth didn't look convinced, but she didn't press him further. Instead, she stood up and ruffled his hair affectionately. "Well, if you're tired, why don't you rest for a bit? Dinner will be ready soon, and I'm sure you'll feel better after eating." Malik nodded silently, watching as she went back inside. Once the door closed behind her, he sighed heavily, leaning his elbows on his knees. He hated lying to Grandma Ruth, but he didn't know what else to do. Telling her the truth meant reliving the entire ordeal. He wasn't sure he was ready for that. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Malik found himself staring at his bike again. Sight of it filled him with conflicting emotions. On one hand, it reminded him of happier times of riding through the neighborhood, with the wind in his face and the freedom to explore wherever he wanted. On the other hand, it now carried the memory of the boy's taunts, making him feel exposed and vulnerable every time he looked at it. Should have stood up to them, Malik thought bitterly. Maybe if I hadn't run away, they wouldn't have kept laughing. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Even if he had said something, would it have made a difference? They were older, bigger, and meaner. Standing up to them might have only made things worse. Still, the guilt gnawed at him, adding to the swirl of emotions already weighing him down. As night fell, Malik finally dragged himself inside. He left his bike on the porch, unable to bring himself to put it away. Climbing into bed, he pulled the covers tightly around him, hoping sleep would provide some relief. But even as his eyelids grew heavy, the memories of the day lingered, refusing to fade in the darkness. Malik whispered softly to himself, almost too quiet for anyone to hear. "I wish I could be brave like Grandma says I am." Unbeknownst to him, Grandma Ruth stood outside his bedroom door, listening silently. She hadn't missed the sadness in his voice earlier, And now, hearing his whispered words, her heart ached for him. Knew there was more to the story than he was letting on, and she vowed to find a way to help him, not just to fix whatever had happened, but to remind him of the strength he carried within. For now, though, all Malik could do was close his eyes and hope tomorrow would bring a fresh start. Little did he know, the events of this day were only the beginning of a journey that would test his courage, resilience, and faith in himself, and ultimately teach him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. The next morning, Malik woke up with a heavy heart. The sunlight streaming through his bedroom window should have been comforting, but it only reminded him of the bright, cheerful day that had turned so sour just 24 hours ago. Lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling and trying to muster the energy to face the world again. But no matter how hard he tried, couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him had changed. When he finally dragged himself out of bed, he avoided looking at his bike, which still sat on the porch where he'd left it the night before. Instead, he shuffled into the kitchen, where Grandma Ruth was already busy preparing breakfast. She greeted him with her usual warmth, setting a plate of pancakes on the table and pouring him a glass of orange juice. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice as soothing as ever. "Did you sleep well?" Malik shrugged, poking at his pancakes with a fork. "Not really," he admitted quietly, keeping his eyes fixed on his plate. Grandma Ruth paused, leaning against the counter as she studied him. "You know, Malik," she began gently, "sometimes life throws us challenges we don't expect. And when that happens, it's okay to feel upset or scared. What matters most is how we choose to move forward." Malik looked up at her, surprised by her words. Almost as if she knew exactly what he was thinking, though he hadn't told her anything about the boys or their taunts. Her expression was calm and reassuring, filled with the kind of wisdom that only came from years of experience. "I don't know if I can move forward," Malik mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're right?" "Not enough?" Grandma Ruth's eyebrows furrowed slightly, and she moved to sit beside him at the table. Taking his hand in hers, she spoke softly but firmly. "Listen to me, Malik. You are more than enough. Don't let anyone make you doubt. You're worth not those boys, not anyone. People who say cruel things often do it because they're unhappy or insecure themselves. That doesn't mean you have to believe them." Her words lingered in the air, sinking into Malik's mind like rain soaking into dry soil. For the first time since yesterday, he felt a tiny flicker of hope spark deep within him that refused to be extinguished. Maybe Grandma Ruth was right. Maybe the boy's words didn't define him. But even so, he wasn't sure how to prove it to them, or to himself. After breakfast, Malik wandered outside, drawn to his bike, despite his earlier reluctance. It still leaned against the porch railing, its red frame glinting faintly in the sunlight. He ran his fingers along the handlebars, tracing the scratches and smudges left behind by yesterday's encounter, though it pained him to see it damaged. He realized something important. The bike itself wasn't broken, not completely. With a little effort, it could shine again, maybe, just maybe, so could he, as he stood there. Lost in thought, he heard footsteps approaching. Turning around, he saw Mr. Patel, their neighbor from down the street, walking toward him with a toolbox in hand. Mr. Patel was an older man, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, always ready with a wave or a friendly word whenever Malik passed by his house. "Good morning, Malik," Mr. Patel greeted him warmly. "I heard about what happened yesterday. Are you doing all right?" Malik blinked in surprise. "How did you hear?" asked, his cheeks flushing slightly. Mr. Patel smiled. "Knowingly, word travels fast in this neighborhood. Plus, I saw you riding away from the park when those boys were bothering you. I wanted to help. But by the time I got there, that nice elderly man had already stepped in." Malik nodded silently, remembering the stranger with the dog who had saved him. He hadn't even thanked him properly. Guilt washed over him, adding to the weight of everything else he was carrying. "Well," Mr. Patel continued, holding up the toolbox, "I thought maybe I could lend a hand fixing your bike. It looks like it took a bit of a beating." Malik hesitated, unsure of what to say. He hadn't considered repairing the bike, It seemed easier to leave it alone, forgotten. But as he looked at Mr. Patel's earnest face, he realized that maybe fixing the bike could be a step toward healing himself, if he could restore something that had been hurt. Perhaps he could start believing in his own ability to heal too. "Okay," Malik said softly, managing a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Patel." Together, they set to work. Mr. Patel showed Malik how to clean the scratches, tighten loose bolts, and polish the frame until it gleamed like new. As they worked side by side, Malik found himself opening up a little, sharing bits and pieces of what had happened without going into too much detail. Mr. Patel listened patiently, nodding occasionally and offering words of encouragement. "You know," Mr. Patel said after a while, "a bike is strong, but it needs care to stay that way. Just like people. Sometimes we get knocked down, but with a little effort and support from others, we can keep moving forward." Malik thought about that as he wiped down the last section of the bike. By the time they finished, it looked better than ever, its red surface shining brightly in the sunlight. Standing back to admire their work, Malik felt a sense of pride bubbling up inside him, not just for the bike, but for taking the first step toward facing his fears. Later that afternoon, Grandma Ruth joined him on the porch, watching as he practiced. "Riding small circles in the driveway? Feeling better?" she asked, her tone light but full of love. Malik nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time in days. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am," though he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Malik felt a newfound determination growing within him. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to let anyone else define who he was. The days that followed were a mix of progress and lingering uncertainty for Malik, though he had repaired his bike and started riding it again. The memory of the teenager's taunts still lingered in the back of his mind like a shadow he couldn't quite shake. Every time he passed Elm Street or saw a group of older kids loitering near the park, his heart skipped a beat and his hands tightened instinctively on the handlebars. But despite the fear gnawing at him, Malik kept pushing forward because giving up wasn't an option. One afternoon, as Malik rode through the neighborhood, he noticed something unusual happening at the community center. A group of neighbors had gathered outside, setting up tables, chairs, colorful banners that read Unity Day Celebration. Curious, Malik slowed down and parked his bike nearby, watching as people worked together to transform the small space into a vibrant hub of activity. "What's going on here?" Malik asked Mrs. Patel, who was arranging bouquets of flowers on one of the tables. She looked up and smiled warmly when she saw him. "It's Unity Day," she explained, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We're hosting a little event to bring everyone in the neighborhood together: games, food, music, and lots of fun. It's all about celebrating our differences and reminding ourselves that we're stronger when we stand united." Malik tilted his head, intrigued. "Why now?" he asked. "Did something happen?" Mrs. Patel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Well, yes and no. We've always wanted to do something like this, but recent events made us realize how important it is. Some of us heard about what happened to you, Malik Hand. While we can't change the past, we can create a future where kindness and understanding matter more than hate." Her words hit Malik like a wave, leaving him speechless. He hadn't realized how many people knew about what had happened or how much they cared. So long he'd felt isolated, as if the weight of the world rested solely on his shoulders. But hearing Mrs. Patel talk about unity and strength made him feel less alone. "Do you want to help set up?" she asked, gesturing toward the table. "We could use another pair of hands." Malik hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure," he said softly, stepping closer. As he began helping arrange decorations and stack plates, he found himself surrounded by friendly faces, neighbors he'd seen around but never really spoken to before. They greeted him with smiles and kind words, making him feel welcomed in a way he hadn't expected. By the time the event began later that evening, the community center buzzed with energy. Families from all over the neighborhood had come together, sharing stories, laughter, and plates of homemade dishes. Children ran around playing tag, while adults danced to lively music played by a local band. The air smelled of spices, fresh bread, and blooming flowers, creating an atmosphere of warmth and connection. As Malik wandered through the crowd, he spotted Grandma Ruth chatting with Mr. Jenkins, the owner of the lemonade stand. She waved him over, pulling him into their conversation. "This is my grandson, Malik," she said proudly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "He's been working hard to remind us all what courage looks like." Malik blushed, feeling both embarrassed and grateful for her praise. Before he could respond, Mr. Jenkins handed him a cup of freshly squeezed lemonade. "Here you go, young man," he said with a wink. "You deserve it." For the first time in days, Malik felt a sense of belonging, a reminder that he was part of something bigger than himself. But just as he was starting to relax, he noticed someone familiar standing at the edge of the crowd. It was the elderly man with the dog, the same one who had intervened when the teenagers had surrounded him. Their eyes met, and the man gave him a small nod and a smile. Encouraged, Malik walked over, clutching his cup of lemonade nervously. "Hi," he said shyly. "I just wanted to say thank you for helping me the other day." The man chuckled softly, patting his dog's head. "No need to thank me, son. I was happy to help. Besides, standing up for each other is what makes a community strong." His words resonated deeply with Malik, reinforcing everything he had been feeling throughout the evening. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone coming together to support one another, to show that kindness could outweigh cruelty. Later that night, as the celebration wound down and families began heading home, Malik stood beside his bike, watching the stars twinkle overhead. Grandma Ruth joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Malik thought for a moment, letting the events of the day replay in his mind. "Better," he admitted finally. "Like maybe things don't have to stay bad forever." Grandma Ruth smiled, squeezing his shoulder. "That's right. Life has its ups and downs, but every challenge gives us a chance to grow stronger and to find beauty in the people around us." As Malik pedaled home under the starlit sky, he realized something important. Healing wasn't something he had to do alone. His bike might have carried him through the streets, but it was the love and support of his community that would carry him through the tougher moments in life. And though the road ahead might still hold challenges, he now knew he had the strength and the people to face them head-on. The days after the Unity Day celebration brought a noticeable shift in Malik's outlook. For the first time since the incident with the teenagers, he began to feel a glimmer of confidence returning not just in himself, but in the world around him. The event had reminded him that he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by people who cared about him and believed in his strength. And while the memory of the boy's cruel words still lingered, it no longer felt as heavy or overwhelming. One sunny afternoon, Malik decided to take his bike for a ride down Elm Street, the very place where everything had happened. It wasn't an easy decision. His heart raced as he approached the park, half expecting to see the same group of teenagers waiting for him. But when he arrived, the area was empty, save for a few kids playing on the swings and a couple walking their dog. The tension in his chest eased slightly. He allowed himself to breathe deeply as he rode past the spot where the encounter had occurred. Malik paused for a moment, looking at it with new eyes. This street, this neighborhood, wasn't defined by one bad moment. It belonged to everyone, the families who walked their dogs here, the children who played tag under the trees, and the neighbors who shared smiles and waves as they passed by. He realized that letting fear dictate where he could go or what he could do would only give the bullies more power over him. He refused to let that happen. Determined to reclaim his sense of freedom, Malik continued riding, exploring parts of the neighborhood he hadn't visited before. Along the way, he stopped to chat with Mrs. Patel, who was tending to her flower garden, and Mr. Jenkins, whose lemonade stand had become a favorite spot for kids after school. Each conversation left him feeling lighter, as if tiny weights were being lifted off his shoulders. But the real test came later that week. Malik was riding home from the library when he spotted them, the same group of teenagers lounging near the basketball court. His stomach tightened instantly, and his hands gripped the handlebars so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Of him wanted to turn around and ride in the opposite direction, but another part, a stronger, braver part, urged him to keep going. Instead of speeding up or avoiding eye contact, Malik slowed down as he passed them. He sat tall on his bike, meeting their stares with steady determination. To his surprise, they didn't say anything this time. One of them muttered something under his breath, but no one stepped into his path or made fun of him. When he finally rode out of sight, Malik let out a shaky breath, realizing he had done something incredible. He had faced his fear without backing down. That evening, Malik couldn't wait to tell Grandma Ruth about what had happened. She listened intently as he recounted the story, her expression calm but proud. "You stood your ground today," she said, smiling warmly. "That takes courage, Malik. Real courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you are." Malik nodded, feeling a swell of pride in his chest. "I guess I'm learning that bravery doesn't mean not being scared," he replied thoughtfully. "It means not letting fear stop you." Over the next few weeks, Malik noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Inspired by the success of Unity Day, several residents organized regular events to bring people together: movie nights in the park, potluck dinners, and even a community cleanup day. Malik participated in every activity he could, eager to contribute and connect with others. Through these experiences, he discovered hidden talents like organizing games for younger kids and formed friendships with neighbors he had barely known before. One person who became particularly close to Malik was the elderly man with the dog, the same man who had intervened during the bullying incident. His name was Mr. Thompson, and he turned out to be a retired teacher with a passion for storytelling. On weekends, Malik often joined Mr. Thompson for walks, listening to tales of his adventures as a young man traveling across the country. These stories taught Malik valuable lessons about resilience, kindness, and the importance of standing up for what's right. "You know, Malik," Mr. Thompson said during one of their walks, "life is full of challenges, big and small. But every challenge is also an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to inspire others. You've already inspired me, just by how bravely you've handled everything." Malik blushed at the compliment, though deep down he knew Mr. Thompson was right. What had started as a painful experience had transformed into something meaningful, an opportunity to find strength within himself and build stronger connections with those around him. Still, there were moments when doubt crept back in. Late at night, lying in bed, Malik sometimes wondered if things would ever truly feel normal again. Would he always carry this weight of uncertainty? Would the memory of those boys' taunts fade completely? Grandma Ruth seemed to sense his lingering worries. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she spoke softly. "Life isn't perfect, Malik. There will always be challenges, disappointments, and people who try to bring us down. But remember this, you have a choice. You can let those things define you, or you can rise above them and show the world who you really are." Her words stayed with Malik long after the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As he drifted off to sleep that night, he realized something profound. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing how to move forward, and Malik was ready to choose courage, kindness, and hope. Little did he know his journey was far from over. While he had grown stronger and more resilient, the neighborhood itself was about to face a challenge that would test everyone's unity. And Malik's newfound bravery would play a crucial role in overcoming it. A few weeks after Malik's courageous ride past the basketball court, the neighborhood faced an unexpected challenge. One evening, as Malik and Grandma Ruth were sitting on their porch enjoying the cool breeze, they heard loud voices coming from down the street. Curious, Malik hopped onto his bike and pedaled toward the commotion, only to find a crowd gathered. Near the community center, the source of the disturbance quickly became clear. Someone had vandalized the building. The once vibrant banners that had adorned the walls during Unity Day were torn and scattered across the ground. Spray-painted words ugly and hateful covered the front doors and windows. Malik's heart sank as he read them. They were cruel messages targeting people based on their race, religion, and background. It was a stark reminder that not everyone in the world believed in unity or kindness. Neighbors stood around, some visibly upset, others whispering angrily among themselves. Mr. Patel was there. Shaking his head in disbelief, while Mrs. Jenkins clutched her husband's arm tightly, tears streaming down her face. Even Mr. Thompson, usually so calm and composed, looked deeply troubled as he patted his dog absent-mindedly. Malik felt a surge of anger and sadness. After all the hard work everyone had put into making the community center a place of joy and connection, someone had tried to tear it apart. For a moment he felt overwhelmed, unsure of what to do or say. But then he remembered Grandma Ruth's words. You have a choice. You can let those things define you, or you can rise above them. Taking a deep breath, Malik approached the group. What are we going to do about this? He asked, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Mr. Patel turned to him, surprised. But grateful for the question. We clean it up, he said firmly. And we make sure whoever did this knows they won't divide us. The next morning, the entire neighborhood came together to repair the damage. Armed with buckets of paint, scrub brushes, and determination, people worked side by side to restore the community center. Malik played a key role, helping younger kids hold paintbrushes and encouraging everyone to stay positive. Though the task was daunting, the atmosphere was filled with camaraderie and hope. As they worked, conversations flowed freely. Neighbors shared stories of their own struggles with prejudice and discrimination, reminding one another that they weren't alone. Malik listened intently, realizing how much strength could be found in vulnerability and honesty. By opening up, they were building bridges not just between each other, within themselves. By late afternoon, the community center looked better than ever. Fresh coats of paint covered the graffiti, and new banners replaced the old ones. The words "Unity" and "Together We Stand" hung proudly above the entrance, a testament to the resilience of the neighborhood. That evening, as the sun began to set, the residents gathered outside the newly restored center for an impromptu celebration. Someone brought out a guitar, and soon music filled the air. Laughter echoed through the streets, mingling with the smell of freshly baked cookies and grilled food. It was a night of healing, a reminder that love and kindness could always overcome hate. As Malik stood with Grandma Ruth, watching the festivities unfold, he felt a profound sense of peace. He'd started this journey feeling small and powerless. But now he knew differently. Courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about choosing to act despite fear. And unity wasn't something that happened automatically. It required effort, empathy, and a willingness to stand together. Look at this, Malik, Grandma Ruth said softly, gesturing to the crowd. This is what happens when people come together. This is what real strength looks like. Malik nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He glanced at his bike leaning against the railing, nearby the same bike that had carried him through so many emotions over the past weeks. It was more than just a mode of transportation. It was a symbol of freedom, resilience, and growth. Later that night, as Malik lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he reflected on everything that had happened. The bullies, the vandalism, the challenges, they hadn't disappeared entirely. Life would always have its ups and downs, and there would always be people who tried to spread negativity. But Malik had learned something invaluable. He didn't have to face those challenges alone. His neighbors, his grandma, and even strangers like Mr. Thompson had shown him the power of community and the importance of standing strong together. With a smile tugging at his lips, Malik closed his eyes, letting sleep wash over him. Would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. But one thing was certain. No matter what lay ahead, Malik was ready. He had discovered the strength within himself, and he knew he would never stop riding toward a brighter future. The end.